So here we go.
Yeah,
So
we can keep talking about this if you want to.
absolutely. Hey everyone, happy Friday. It just apologies for a little bit of a delay here. I was always, running a little close to the bone there. I just want to get some extra coffee in at the coffee shop and some extra focused work. And then a giant train came through and I couldn't get to my car. I literally had to walk like a couple blocks to get under the underpass to get to my car. And then I'm trying to get home and then they're doing some tree maintenance or something and it's like slow stop sign. Oh, it's terrible. But we're here today. How's it going, Nate? Hopefully you've had a little less of a chaotic last hour than I have.
Yeah, probably less chaotic. Good to be here, Joel, as always. And yeah, excited to talk about all the stuff we have on the agenda for today.
Yeah, for sure. We were just uh, let's wait for a couple extra people to trickle in. But what we were just talking about is, privacy stuff and privacy coins, and but more importantly, how like the privacy coin space is very ideologically motivated, but just hasn't really gotten its shit together too much as far as you know. Which it's kind of funny. I'm wearing a Nighthawk T-shirt for the Nighthawk team, the Zcash wallet, because they gave me that. And I presented at Zcon with them. Very nice people. I feel like as far as getting it together, the Zcash team absolutely has it on the pure technical level of things. Of like the tech is just awesome. As far as end user products and building a community and all the other like product stuff, definitely not. I would say they're lagging a little bit. And then probably the only privacy tech that's just top notch and is actually being used, like getting actual generating fees and stuff, is probably Railgun. The Railgun's contract is probably the only one that does both. It's like super top level and is actually like being used and bringing in money. So other than that, though, the space is super important, but needs a lot of overhauls, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think privacy space is, I would say, yeah, extremely ideologically motivated, and also somewhat lacking in the terms of the development of some projects, the marketing of others, both for some. And but yeah, I mean, I'd also say like Monero, notwithstanding its history and everything like that, is a pretty good example of good marketing and also good tech. And I think there's a few other projects like Railgun, awesome. Love the guys at Railgun, love what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, love the products they're building, and and then there's another couple of projects on my radar right now. Penumbra,
Mm-hmm.
there's DarkFi. So Rose, actually, speaking of the marketing side of things, Rachel
Mm-hmm.
Rose O'Leary has been talking about the meme of privacy and how that has been presented to the public and some of the shortcomings with the marketing around like privacy is normal and things like that. So I would highly recommend checking out Rachel Rose O'Leary's talks from DarkFi on privacy and the ideological underpinnings of all these projects that are coming out right now.
Yeah, it's definitely we're waiting for the holy grail of projects, right? Where we're
It's
waiting
coming.
we're waiting for like an actual like decentralized community and structure. We're waiting for like a good structure, incentive structure, governance system, or ungovernance. That's a something we'll be touched on later. All that stuff, but then like great modern end user products as well as technology. It's just like we're having like Bitcoin is kind of the dream as far as some pieces, but it's absolutely in other ways not only dinosaur tech but like set up to fail in other ways. And then all the new stuff that's like, oh, I want to get behind this. It's just like 48% insider pre-mine. Just done. Like just done. A lot of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. All right, we should
Yeah,
probably
definitely.
probably actually roll the intro and get this thing going. All
Cool.
right, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. All right, welcome officially, official ESC. Welcome to the Digital Cash Rundown, episode 124. It's kind of crazy to think that I've done this for almost every single week for 124 plus weeks straight. Nice. I'm joined by the one and only human on this planet named Nate. How's it going, Nate?
Haven't gotten that introduction before, but I appreciate it. It's going well, Joel. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no problem. I just, in the longer form kind of thing, I just say Nate of EatSleepCrypto. But here you just get the distinction of just being Nate. It's just like a mononym, like Madonna. Madonna who? Like just Madonna. Like what more do you need?
The artist formerly known as at EatSleepCrypto till Elon nuked it out of existence.
Yeah, why did that happen? Do you know? I mean, obviously you don't know for sure, but do you have any inklings of what could have been going down there?
Yeah, conspiracy hat on. No, I was just participating in a technical discussion thread. I wasn't like trashing anything, wasn't being really contentious, just was talking about the trade-off between scalability and something. And everybody in the thread got nuked, but I didn't have a phone number added, so I wasn't able to get back. And I've spent 2 months appealing to the support team, but I think Elon probably fired them first thing when he walked in.
Yeah.
So
at least you didn't get a poop emoji as a response, you know?
it could have been worse.
Yeah, absolutely. It could definitely have been worse. So let's it's kind of funny with like these sort of news shows. Like for the last 6 months, it's been like sparse as far as like what specific. There's always stuff to talk about, but as far as headlines, it's been a little sparser. But today, I mean, this time, there's a couple of things that have happened that are sort of, I think, very important, but also great lead-ins to greater things. And of course, the big one is, which the claim to the thumbnail graphic spot with the AI generation and stuff, has been PayPal. Because we all care about PayPal. Anyway, here we go. First one. PayPal USD, boon for Ethereum, but not for decentralization, says community. Proponents of PayPal's PYUSD could see Ethereum becoming the money layer of the internet, while opponents argue this will act like a poorly designed central bank digital currency. My hot take super fast on that is yes to both. Anyway, basically, yeah, PayPal launched a stablecoin, which I don't understand. So I don't 100% understand why they launched a stablecoin rather than just. I don't understand the entirety of why would you keep launching new Everyone has a new stablecoin that aren't the same thing, and it's not like dollars where a dollar is a dollar. It's like they're all different. Is there any way you could just partner with something else and just have more, like grow a single stablecoin that's popular? I don't know. What do you think?
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you on like yes to both. I mean, we have very similar ideological leanings, and so with PayPal, I think like the reason that they would want to do this is they're seeing the spread that's being captured by other stablecoin providers right now and saying, I want 3% on $1 billion or $2 billion of market cap, and so they've launched a stablecoin and they've got this brand around it. So for context for the listeners, the way Circle makes money is you park your money at Circle, they go buy treasury bonds that are paying out 2, 3, 4, 5%, and then they get that money every however often they're clipping the coupons. So they're earning money on top of the stable coins that are created and essentially on deposit with the bank that provides Circle their banking services. So PayPal is looking at this business model and saying, I want a piece of that, and we're going to use our brand to get it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how like it's literally just kind of becoming like a bank. They're just issuing more money. They're not even issuing. I mean, they are, but it's basically the same as just like opening up customer accounts, except it's the customer accounts follow the customer even after they don't have an account, kind of. It's really an interesting racket that kind of only got exposed by, like, could you imagine this kind of a system in a crypto-only world? Let's just say the Bitcoin standard with that, whatever that douche with the book likes to say.
Seinfeld?
Yeah, Seinfeld. So let's just say that's the case. No one's going to be scrambling to issue Bitcoin stablecoins necessarily. They might do wrapped assets, but that's just, oh, you can use it on this network. But why would you have 5 different wrapped Bitcoins all on Ethereum, for example? It's a little different, right?
Yeah, I actually, this might be a hot take. I think
Cool.
in a yeah, I think in a crypto forward world, we would actually see a lot of competing stable coins, and it would be for this reason. But they would be competing not as much on compliance, because obviously these centralized companies are concerned with getting cracked down on by regulators, and so they're putting in these backdoors that I'm sure we'll talk about, of where they can steal your assets. But I think we would see groups of people similar to like the Liberty Dollar with Bernard von Nothaus. We would see groups of people creating privately issued stable coins and competing on decentralization or censorship resistance on properties that people in crypto actually care about.
Yeah, definitely not the kind of things that are being competed on right now, for sure, with like this whole thing. But as far as like boon to the community, just gonna throw up on screen cryptofees.info real quick, which is one of my very favorite sites to go through for actual metrics. So, for example, Bitcoin's generating about $715,000 in fees today, and Ethereum is around 5.5 million. And so that's from just business, from people doing things on Ethereum. Probably not a lot of it is just moving around Ethereum or running specific Ethereum-based smart contracts, meaning to do things with Ethereum. A lot of it, I would guess, is running tokens and running tokens through smart contracts and doing things like that. And so the stablecoin boom is really like, Ethereum's already like almost 10x what Bitcoin is as far as like actual usage and revenue, what the market cares about. It's so, I mean, Ethereum probably generates more revenue than the rest of the crypto space combined, maybe. I mean, that might be, I don't know if that's a hot take or if that's true or not, but it's honestly like gangbusters. And like, honestly, we've seen, as far as the CBDC thing, obviously we have like Tether, we have BUSD, we have USDC. Now we have the PYUSD, which I hate that acronym. It looks a little dirty to me. But then we start to have some CBDCs coming. Like I believe Brazil's CBDC uses a Ethereum fork. It's not actually on Ethereum, but they should have done it on Ethereum, let's be honest. And eventually, I think that Ethereum is becoming the backbone for global finance right now, kind of. It's very early to see if that's going to be the case, but it's trending in that direction.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am seeing that trend. I think that narrative is also being pushed, so it's kind of like an artificial narrative that's been created. I know Ryan Sean Adams of Bankless has been pushing this concept, and I think the truth is somewhere in between, where I don't think, look at Brazil. I don't think governments are going to want to do open finance or whatever the meme is on Ethereum, because Ethereum is censorship resistant, to an extent. There's a debate there. But so we're seeing like Brazil creating their own Ethereum fork to run their CBDC. I think we could see something of that nature for each country, and maybe each like conglomerate of countries. But an interesting kind of adjacent concept is the idea that the dollar is losing support around the world, and it seems obvious to me that a solution to this would be for the U.S. government, to start not only allowing stablecoins on Ethereum, but promoting them as a way to export the dollar around the world to these developing economies, so that they're not using their own currencies and allowing others to participate in those and gather a network effect around the digital real. But instead, they would be accruing value to the dollar by having that used in more economies.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine how long do you think it is until those currency kiosks that you see in like all airports and stuff, to where they start providing liquidity on Uniswap for stable coins? Like, it's next step. It's like very close. It's kind of the same thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think it is close. This is kind of one thing I think about CBDCs. A lot of people are worried about CBDCs. I'm not, because I think they will be teaching people how crypto works and getting them familiar with how to use crypto. All we have to do is copy the user interface to whatever the CBDC creates. If it's even good, it probably won't be, because I'm sure everyone here has seen how great government is at creating software. So I think that would be not the worst case scenario is like CBDC as an onboard to crypto. But the thing that I'm concerned about is the interdependence of DeFi on the dependence of DeFi on these centralized stablecoins, because fundamentally these are real world assets and they are incompatible with a blockchain because they depend on a trusted third party, right? Satoshi said the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is still required. It's a direct quote from the Bitcoin white paper. And now here everyone is saying, we need to get 1 billion users, we need mass adoption, and we need trusted third parties. They implicitly or explicitly, they are saying this by yielding to and encouraging USDC, Pi USD, USDT even to an extent. And so I see this as a major existential risk for Ethereum, is dependence on centralized stablecoins.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those very weird kind of things is I think Ethereum, one of Bitcoin's drawbacks, I guess, especially with the constrained block size and stuff, is you can't do much with it. It's just kind of like if you believe in the cause, you think it's decentralized, hard, sound money, you're going to use it and you're going to find whatever else, but it doesn't interface with the fiat world very well. It doesn't interface with much of anything. And Ethereum's, I don't know if this was like part of like the master plan, but I'm increasingly liking what the kind of approach to adoption that Ethereum has taken, in that it's run like a business, in that it's build your product on us. Like we're a service provider that will take your money and you do whatever you want with it. And obviously not every network needs to do the exact same thing, but if you think about it, like for example, one could argue that the primary use of Monero is as a Bitcoin sidechain, sort of, where people like use it they swap into it to like do privacy and stuff. The Whirlpool that Samurai Wallet and other wallets like that, the CoinJoin thing on Bitcoin, has a lot more money in it than the whole Lightning Network, for example. I mean, people are using a lot. There's whole businesses running on that, even though it's so janky kind of. But then like Railgun, for example, the Railgun contract makes like $200,000 a day or something. So Railgun is just a business. I mean, obviously the DAO is a kind of business, but like the contract itself makes like half of Bitcoin's entire transaction fee volume just providing a service to Ethereum users or, Polygon users or other people like that, just running that. And I do think that mass adoption of crypto is going to be really difficult if you don't have a revenue producing model of some kind, like a business. And the only way you can do that is by giving people what they want. Sometimes they want peer-to-peer digital cash. Usually they just don't want to buy your weird little token to just send that around. Like they want to send what they want to send. And you gotta, like, I do think that every single decent privacy coin, for example, let's just say a privacy coin or a digital cash coin or whatever, should have at least some sort of a stablecoin option on chain where the actual currency acts as the gas for that, to just like run off the volatility until finally you can say, well, this is better to use actual money. But I think if it doesn't, it's just like really tricky. But anyway, that was a little mini rant.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love Railgun. I mean, it's a phenomenal model for like a business model for a product and a service.
I just realized I'm wearing Railgun socks right now.
Hey, I know which ones you're talking about.
Yeah.
Amsterdam. Eatdam.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So Railgun, have you had those guys on, by the way?
Yes, I've had Alan on.
Okay,
and
cool.
then I am seeking to get both Alan and Kai both on, or maybe get John on or someone like that on
Yeah.
specifically on the Zcash podcast that I run to try to
That's
kind
cool.
of show the zero knowledge proof effect beyond
Yeah.
just that ecosystem. But yeah, very very good fan, big fan of those guys and their work, but also just for the purposes of this thing, a big fan of the way of the business model kind of a thing of
Yeah.
if you use the Railway wallet, it's just super easy to just use it just the same as anything else. And then you just do all the stuff you wanted to, but private, and then just shuffle off a bunch of money to them, you know? And it's
Yeah.
just like for a project that most people, let's be honest, haven't heard of, it's making a lot more money than a lot of these, like generating, I should say, a lot more revenue than, and therefore usage than most things.
Yeah. Yeah. Railgun's part of the real yield group of protocols on Ethereum. So they're paying out dividends in a really straightforward way. Actually, I don't know that their token pays out dividends. They have a governance token that I believe accrues governance rights over the treasury. I'll have to double check that one.
Mm-hmm.
But Railgun is a great example of a protocol that's taking profit and capturing value. This is the second principle of tokenomics.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing that with the first principle of tokenomics, protocol utility.
Mm-hmm.
So they're first creating a lot of value, but they're also capturing some value, because you can create a lot of value without capturing any of it. This is like the, call this the Edison problem or the
Mm-hmm.
Tesla problem. It's like Tesla might have had a free energy machine, but he wasn't able to monetize it, or so the story goes. He wasn't able to meter this electricity, so JP Morgan didn't want to invest. That's because JP Morgan is interested in returns. Tesla was interested in creating value, but as a result, for his failure to capture value, his protocol, his product did not catch on.
Mm-hmm.
Contrarily, Edison, allegedly stole a lot of work of other engineers, but was able to monetize it effectively. And so when you look in the history books, you're going to see Edison's name and not Tesla's, and not other people who had contributed to his inventions.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the, this is the trade-off. There are trade-offs between the principles of tokenomics. And I think you're describing, Railgun is a protocol that has done it well and done it directly, and just capturing value for
Mm-hmm.
a defensible service. So they've created something that they can maintain a relative, market share over. And because of that, they're able to capture some value and charge that directly to users. So love the Railgun guys.
Yeah, and that definitely translates back to Ethereum, where Bitcoin kind of capped out at the block size limit, and there's times of like constraints, and then the rest of it is like 50-cent fees, which is not too bad. And with Ethereum's always redlining the engine. Like, it's just always stuff going on, probably because of these things.
Yeah.
But let me just hit on this tweet thing here about the PayPal thing, right? The new PayPal USD stablecoin has an asset protection role, which can wipe your balance in 2 transactions. First freeze, then wipe frozen asset. In smart contract security, we call this centralization attack vector. So before we get too like hyped on this PayPal thing, yeah, they can. It's just like a PayPal account where they can keep you from moving your money if they want to, and they can just take it. So that sucks.
It'd be great. I haven't looked into the smart contract here, but if you could create some kind of MEV bot to front run either of those 2 functions, and give the permissions to spend those coins to like some third-party smart contract that would then front run any freezing of your assets by sending it to a different specified address.
Mm-hmm.
Someone out there, please do this.
Yeah, now you're thinking like a degen.
Well, ultimately, we just want to preserve censorship resistance. Like, clearly a bullshit move by Picoin and PayPal. So want to make sure that we're, if they want to play in Ethereum, they need to play by the degens rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so my little comment on that, I did a tweet quoting that said, selectively freezing and stealing money is exactly what I came to crypto to avoid. Yeah, stay away from PayPal's new stablecoin. So, which I'm not saying like, I understand this has utility for people. I'm just saying, if you can, like goal as people in crypto, or principled people in crypto. Unprincipled people could just like make money off of it, and that's fine. But principled people should probably try to move people further and further into the censorship resistant kind of vectors of the whole space and away from this kind of stuff. Stablecoins are nice, but I try to almost never use them, and I try to engage with people. If someone will take payment in a native crypto asset, even if it's more of a pain in the ass, I'll just do that, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is something you hit on in Amsterdam, just the importance of paying with crypto and why we should all strive to do that. And so I've been using base cryptocurrency, native L1 assets as often as possible. I love that that's something that you do really well and have kind of pioneered that whole path of like, here's how to spend crypto in your day-to-day life. And you prove that it's possible. And I'd love to see more people in the crypto space really on board with that.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird how this adoption curve has sort of gone, because on the one hand, adoption is way higher today than has ever been, in my opinion, of all crypto. On the other hand, back in the early like Bitcoin days of like 2015, 16, even 17, 18, a lot of people were, maybe 19, people are using a lot more native assets, a lot more sending Bitcoin, sending ETH, sending, Monero or Dash or Bitcoin Cash or all those kinds of things. People are like using those. Now I kind of feel like that, as far as payments, has like shrunk a little bit. Whereas the stablecoin market has just like boomed. It's not only eaten a little bit of that, but obviously it's mostly gotten people who otherwise wouldn't use crypto, probably. But it has eaten into some of the people using crypto, in my casual, I guess, observation. Do you get the same kind of vibe?
Yeah, definitely. I think, initially Bitcoin was a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's become bank-to-bank, digital shiny rock.
Mm-hmm.
And there are more criticisms there, but, it's started off with all of these ideologically motivated people that were trying to get people spending Bitcoin, and it was working. We had Microsoft, we had Newegg, we had all of these CPU providers, these like graphics card sellers, retailers that were accepting Bitcoin. And we had essentially a circular economy because we were buying these computer parts, building mining rigs, and then spending Bitcoin to get more of those things. And sure, you had people on the back end of that had to arbitrage and take a cut for themselves. They were going to, at some point in the supply chain, people were being paid in dollars, but we were at least accruing value to Bitcoin by using it in this economy, because a currency gets its value through its use as a medium of exchange. This is why Bitcoin bootstrapped value initially. It's why the value started to spike when people were using it on the Silk Road, because the Bitcoin had to be worth at least as much as all the goods and services that it was paying for. So I think, the dilution of people spending crypto has come as a direct result of the block size limit and, the block size wars that happened from 2013 to 2017.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone really can argue against that. Like, even people that believe it was worth it to restrict the block size, I still think it's been really, like, anyone who's been around during that whole time sees, and it's just been a real, I guess, tragedy in that way. One thing that I think a lot of projects still seek speculation. They still seem to be after, like, getting people to buy in, and then maybe one day something different. But it's kind of like the basic economics of, if I buy coin X, I'm willing to pay whatever it's worth today, plus a small premium up until it hits its utility limit, and then you won't pay anymore. So it's like, for example, let's just say I wanted to buy drugs on the Silk Road back in the day, which, not that anyone cares, but I never did, because I'm just, I'm very content with alcohol. But it's like, just say one wanted to do that. It's just like, well, how much will you pay for drugs, or for whatever? How much do you want that? That's the utility. And so then you'll buy Bitcoin. You even lose a little money like saying I'm going to buy, let's say weed, be innocuous, and even drugs anyway. Like even buy spend $50 on weed. You're willing to spend, let's say, $65 on the Bitcoin that it would take to then buy that on the Silk Road. That's like, but then 100, nah. So there's that constant buy pressure that pushes up the price a little bit over time, even when the price is going down. Now all of a sudden the window gets smaller because, oh, you might lose a little bit more, but you're still going to lose a little. You're still okay with buying and losing some money because the utility is worth it. But then when you don't have that, you just like, it's all speculation, and it's all like, well, where's the price going to go? Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? I don't know. And then the value, the base value of the currency really doesn't exist. In Ethereum, you need it to power things. So that has a constant sort of undercurrent of value right there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the underlying inspiration for demand side tokenomics. It's this tokenomics framework I've created over the last couple of years. It gets people using the asset, using the token in its economy, in its protocol, that causes it to accrue value. And it's gonna map to either a currency, an equity, or a commodity in the way that it behaves and the way that the asset is valued in turn. So I'm with you. I think the problem is that people are looking to Bitcoin, which is devoid of any intrinsic value to the degree that it's no longer used as a medium of exchange. And they're saying, well, this is the one that's the most successful. Let's model our token after that. And so they're trying to focus on how to increase speculation, not realizing that there is no price floor for assets that are entirely speculative. There's no minimum price for Bitcoin to sustain because there's no real utility to it other than going up and, number go up and being able to sell it at a higher price later. But what people fundamentally do not realize is that order books don't unwind the same way they stack up. And so just because there's a buyer today at $30,000 for Bitcoin doesn't mean there's going to be a buyer tomorrow. It might be a safe bet, but it's complete speculation. Contrast that with something like Bitcoin circa 2013 or Ethereum or Monero, which is being used daily to purchase things. There is a minimum possible price for each of these types of assets to sustain based on their use as whatever they're being used for. And so I help protocols create products and features that are going to integrate their tokens in these and maximize their intrinsic value.
That's a great meme, probably. Instead of raise the roof, you want to raise the floor, right? You know, raise the price floor. I don't really care how high it goes. I just care how low it goes. And so if I just want the low to get higher and higher, that's really all I personally care about.
Yeah, I think it's like a conservative approach to crypto investing, and it plays out in at least that way where you know the minimum value of the token that you're buying. But it also plays out in that you're adding consistent buy pressure to the order book, and that's chipping away at the order book over time in a way that's going to cause the token price to trend up. So that's kind of the two ways that demand side tokenomics plays in. And I think it's a good example. The examples you provided are great.
Yeah. So hitting back on this PYUSD thing, Paul Pui, good friend of ours, right? He posted, don't think that PayPal is alone. Fiat boys include Circle, Coinbase, Tether. Algo stables are the only way out of this, but unfortunately not very capital efficient. Which is funny because on a couple levels. First of all, the Fiat boys censorship kind of thing, I would say I don't think it is, but censorship is a feature, not a bug for them. In order to run the company, like PayPal cannot have people stealing money and going and like buying nukes for Kim Jong-un all over there. They can't have that going on. So they're willing to pay more. Their customers, I guess, are willing to pay more just because otherwise PayPal wouldn't offer it, to just be able to censor transactions if they need to. And so they literally pay more to Ethereum for this ability. I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Cunningham, but he's doing a video on the cost of censorship on USDC and other stablecoins. We've literally breaking down like the fee differences that it takes to like run through all blacklisted addresses and stuff with the contract. And so we're to where like DAI is significantly cheaper to transact in, from what I've been told. I don't do it a lot, than something like USDC for that very reason. But again, they're not making it expensive just for making expensive. That is the utility that those centralized issuers want. They want the ability to roll back their crypto, and it's valuable to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would love to watch Scott's video on that. That's there's definitely, obviously, like the additional explicit costs of censorship to USDC, and I hope he highlights the cost to the wider ecosystem in the form of an externality, which is that nobody is safe in their USDC. People don't truly own these assets that they think they own. So it's an externality in economics is where a group of users is bearing the costs for something they don't explicitly pay for or sign up for. And in this case, that's the lack of censorship resistance.
Yeah, that's it's kind of interesting though, because I don't think customers want that at all. They do not care. Some do, if they're like, oh, someone steals my money because I'm an idiot or I fall for some scam. I want them to be able to expropriate that, to bring back the money. Some people do. Mostly customers though want like PayPal's blessing. And in order to get PayPal's blessing, they have to submit to the censorship. And so it's kind of an indirect demand. But I think it's interesting. Paul is talking about capital efficient, inefficient algo stables. And first of all, I don't think that's the only issue with algo stables. I think there's a lot of I don't think they've been properly figured out. And I don't think I'll ever 100% trust an algo stable, let's just be honest. It has to be redeemable directly for an asset with, what do they call it? Extrinsic value or whatever for, I'm using the wrong word, but who cares? Well, for external value of some kind. It's so, because then there's a play that adds the price floor, because if it's like, oh, you can at least burn it and then get your ETH back, and ETH can do lots of things, for example. Like that can help, but it's still like a game you're playing, a little algo game, and it could go wrong. Whereas if you're pegging it to $1, then the dollar, as long as you can redeem it for the dollar in the bank account, then it's pegged. It's properly pegged. But he's mentioning about capital inefficient. So in order to become more capital efficient, or capital worth it, I should say, they have to raise the rates, raise the transaction fees on those stablecoins, so that the savings that they make by not having to censor anyone, not being able to, gets them to is actual extra revenue to pay for now how much more expensive it is to run the coin, not necessarily process the transactions. And so then the market rates have to kind of like even out. And so I actually think that the decentralized stablecoin is probably going to become more expensive, despite everything Scott Cunningham is going to find out about the USDC extra cost, because in order to pay for people to run it, decentralization is an extra cost.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, censorship resistance is expensive, right? And that's, it is computationally expensive. It's capital intensive a lot of the time. And so we should expect these things to be a little more expensive, but we want them to be reasonably more expensive. Mm-hmm. The service that's being provided is stability in a space where assets are not guaranteed by any trusted third party the way that they are, ostensibly guaranteed by the U.S. government, the FDIC, a bank, whatever it is. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that they would be more expensive. The particular trade-offs I think you're talking about, I see three. So at Token Dynamics, we focus a lot on optimizing for trilemmas. And the trilemma I see in stablecoins is between scalability, censorship resistance, or decentralization, and what was the third? I tweeted about this the other day. People can just Google official ESC stablecoins Twitter. But
I forget all my tweets.
stablecoin, censorship resistance, scalability, and capital intensity, like we were talking about. So these are the three. And there are going to be trade-offs between each. And to your point about not trusting any particular stablecoins, I think the best solution to this is going into not scalable, but censorship resistant and capital efficient stablecoins. And so two examples of this, which not financial advice, not tokenomics advice. I haven't done a deep dive on either of these two yet, but Liquidity and UXD. So, and actually there's a so Liquidity is like you put up ETH and then it over collateralizes it and creates you a stable coin. Like that's the long short. It does it in a way that's more censorship resistant than DAI because it's not using USDC, and they have a couple mechanisms in there that make it more stable, but it's not as scalable. And Liquidity could be the Liquidity protocol could be applied to several different types of assets. It doesn't just have to be Ethereum. It is for now, but this is it's a censorship resistant and relatively capital efficient stablecoin. UXD is on Solana, and there's an analog on Arbitrum. I forget what it's called. Might be like, I don't remember the name right now. It's something to do with the ocean or water or something like that. But they are delta neutral stablecoin. So this is my favorite approach so far. You long spot and short the perpetual of the underlying asset. So you sell the future of some asset, like let's say Bitcoin. You sell the Bitcoin future short, so that if the price goes down, then you make money on the short. I guess if the price goes up, then you make money on the short. And then, let me think about this.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. I'm pretty sure. How familiar are you with the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem of today?
So I was in Bitcoin Cash for like 3 years as like a pretty staunch Bitcoin Cash fan. I'm somewhat familiar with Cash tokens, and I know AnyHedge, which is what I'd imagine you're going to mention.
That's what I was kind of saying, is just opening longs and shorts in order to like balance out give like a stable coin price of that. And obviously that's dependent on liquidity on the other side of like how many people want to take that
exactly
on the other side. But it is an interesting mechanic. What I would like to do, first off, as I've mentioned a million times before, I would love to have a non-fiat stablecoin at some point, like that's like a basket of crypto assets, for example. It's like just like a 50% Bitcoin and ETH, or like a Bitcoin ETH. Each token is redeemable for equal parts of the value in Bitcoin, ETH, and Tether. Let's just say, for example. And then it's just like, well, it's kind of like fiat, but it's also mostly crypto, but it's not just one or the other. It's, the directly redeemable part is something that I think that if you could make it to where, you could have that happen, that would be cool. That's sort of what Thorchain's design is doing, where they just launched what they call lending, which I don't like that they're calling it lending, because I get that that's the easiest way you can say it, but let's just say you deposit like 10 grand in Bitcoin. You can, as a loan, you get, let's say, 5 grand out. That it's a five grand loan, but double over collateralized, but can never be liquidated. You can always get your 5 grand of Bitcoin out or whatever, and so you have to pay back 5 grand in order to get it out. And so if your Bitcoin goes 10x, now it's 50 grand, but you still have to just pay that 5 grand back to the protocol to get it out. And so in that, it's basically like you're opening up a long on your Bitcoin. And I mean, they call it a short. They call it lending, but like, it's like, for example, if I need to pay a bill today, I would put my crypto in and I would pay for the bill. And then when the money goes really high up, that's when I jailbreak it and now have that extra money. So it makes me much less shy about spending crypto low because of that. And so like little things like that, there's a bunch of new technologies like that, and I think if enough of these are used, the actual price of the cryptos long term will start to stabilize a little bit. If there's just enough betting on, what's going to be now, what's going to be later, and then, enough equalization. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that's another approach to stablecoins that is not quite scalable in that it's limited to the underlying assets and the availability of those for collateral, but like the
Mm-hmm.
similar mechanism to how other stablecoins are doing it. Um, Thorchain doesn't give you stablecoins, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
it's
agree
funny.
with you on
Is
the
it
lexicon.
actually does. The original lending design was shelved temporarily because it used an algo stable that is right when Luna collapsed and just they weren't getting it through. And it still does, but it still does use
Huh.
a Thor USD stablecoin as a purely accounting mechanism. An internal accounting mechanism. This is the last design I heard of. I could be spreading misinformation, so make sure you look into the current setup. But basically, if you get like if you get like a $5,000 loan, it burns the equivalent amount of Rune, their native token, and
Mm,
mints $5,000 of Thor USD, which then gets burned and then converted into safe. You can even take a Bitcoin loan out on your Bitcoin. So you have $5,000 of Bitcoin. You take a loan out and it just gets in Bitcoin. So you have $10,000 of Bitcoin in that eventually can jailbreak if you pay back the $5,000. So just the way it works is kind of interesting. A lot of that stuff on Thorchain and stuff like that is not only quite complicated, but it's also like smarter than me. Where I'm like I get like 80% of it, but then it's not just like more educated than me, it's also like more intelligent than me, to where I'm like, wow, these guys are weird wizard people.
yeah, we have a deep dive at Token Dynamics on Thorchain. We're going to publish in the next couple weeks, and I didn't see the internal mechanism for the USD Thor, but I also didn't read the white paper myself. I'm doing more of the aggregation and looking at the docs and things like that. But I'd be curious about how Alex from Maya Protocol addressed
Mm-hmm.
that same problem, because Alex and Maya have made significant improvements on Thor's tokenomics. Really impressive. And I think they're going the wrong direction in some ways, but overall they've made some great changes.
Yeah, and before we get too, just the last thing before we get too into like super sidetracked on
Sure.
everything, we actually hit on the Drivechains thing.
Yeah.
Before the two,
Speaking of innovation.
yeah, the two major differences in the Maya protocol and Thorchain, because it's just a fork of Thorchain, other than it has fewer assets but Dash, which Thorchain doesn't have, and it's getting like Cardano and Kujira and some Arbitrum and some other things that
Mhm.
also Thorchain doesn't have. But the big difference is the liquidity bonded nodes, meaning instead of just like the Rune token, because like all liquidity pools in Thorchain are Rune and let's say Bitcoin, like the native asset, but the actual nodes are just Rune in order
Mhm.
to the proof of stake of that, right? Whereas Maya is liquidity units are bonding the nodes too. So now you get to actually use all that in trades for trades and liquidity and stuff like that, which is kind of, I think, innovative. It could be risky. It's more capital efficient. It could be risky if like the security model doesn't work out where people think it's worth it to steal from the protocol.
Mhm.
That's a different thing I haven't dug into. But then the other thing I thought was interesting is literally their entire token distribution. They just airdropped, I guess, to people who provided liquidity and locked up their liquidity for a while, and they have zero inflation, which
Yeah.
I think is from a long term value of the token kind of perspective is fantastic. I mean, Rune's prices, Thorchain's done so well, but the Rune token has done so poorly. But I've also felt it in the behavior of the Maya team, where you can tell that they launched a business basically, and they have no money. There's no inflation. There's no VC funding. There's nothing. It's just better start making money. And it's like, whoa, that's very so many crypto protocols. Like Bitcoin kind of makes money. Ethereum definitely makes money. Nothing else does. Like Bitcoin Cash and they're $50 a day. Get out of here. Like you're not like I'm serious. Some days it's like $50, and then Monero's like $1,000 or maybe 1,500 if they're lucky. And it's just like inflation is literally holders paying you is the only thing securing the network right now. And that's not like a criticism. It's just saying Satoshi's like emission schedule was I don't have anything wrong with that. It allows for people to build unsustainable projects and networks for way too long. And I kind of like the idea of like a 5-year emission schedule type thing. For example, I haven't thought this through, by the way. This is just a random thing off the top of my head. But like where literally your inflation goes to 0 over 5 years. And like the security budget, if you haven't gotten paying customers by then, you're just screwed. Just game over. It's over. Just try again, or like join a different project because you failed. Like I kind of like that, like the real business where it's like you have to make money. You have to make things work instead of just running on inflation forever and just never making a usable product.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things to hit on there. Firstly, I love the approach that Maya Protocol is taking with bootstrapping token value, because Maya, their tokens will accrue value the same way Rune has, in that it will map 1-to-1, or probably 2-to-1 because of the over collateralization requirement, maybe 3, I guess, as it is in Thorchain, but with like the nodes bonding and everything. But the value is there, and it will automatically accrue to Maya to the extent that the protocol is used. And that's like demand side tokenomics 101, is make sure people have to use your token in order to use the protocol, and then make sure that it's used in ways that accrue value to it. And the other thing that I see there is you mentioned the emission schedule and everything. It's like the emission schedule is important if you're doing ongoing development for the protocol. Or the way, the paying devs is important if you're doing ongoing development. So like in Monero, where there are constantly upgrades, there needs to be some system of governance, and there needs to be some way to pay for the changes that are happening to the protocol. Otherwise, it's just on benevolent whales like Roger Ver and Bitcoin Cash to subsidize the development of all of these things. And that's not like the worst, but it's not great, and it definitely doesn't mesh with censorship resistance and decentralization. So I'm a fan, and we've talked about this, and hopefully we'll talk about this some more on future podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of ungovernance, where you launch the protocol as it is, you make it non-upgradable, and you issue it with all the features you want and with whatever allocation you want, ideally just airdropping to people or having some kind of fair token distribution mechanism or event. And there are lots of those that people are not using yet. And then just having the network run. Like that is the way that people should be developing these applications. I'm sure we'll talk about it.
So like the BSV approach.
Kind of the BSV approach with set in stone, except we can see clearly that when they say set in stone, they mean in a way that Craig Wright and only Craig Wright can change it. So they've hard-coded the interests of the particular people who are running the network now. Yeah. But they haven't actually hard-coded the network.
Well, speaking of hard-coded the network and stuff, and speaking of Bitcoin and especially one true Bitcoins, let's get to this bit thing. I just put up the one from Truthcoin about BIP 300 is inevitable. It's the only, which is Drivechains, by the way, I guess, for Bitcoin. It's the only L2 that pays miners that you can directly onboard to. So it'll activate versus miner activate star fork, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. But basically this fellow is pushing Drivechains very hard. So I am sort of new to the whole Drivechains world as an L2. I use Lightning relatively frequently. I understand pretty well how it works, like better than 80% of Bitcoiners, I think, and then the 20% that are building it maybe understand more than me. But it's at first it seems like a great L2 type solution. Do you know exactly how Drivechains work?
I couldn't tell you exactly how Drivechains work. My familiarity with Drivechains goes back to around 2017. I remember Paul spoke at Anarchapulco, and I talked to him afterward about it. And 2017 was around the time that it became clear that nothing like Drivechains in terms of the scale of innovation would ever be accepted by the Bitcoin community, because they have so rejected intelligent contributions to the Bitcoin protocol that it's caused this death spiral of brain drain, where each new group of Bitcoiners is dumber than the last, and the old group of smart people moves on to another protocol. Like Bitcoin Cash even had a few people that were real top-notch contributors. You had Vitalik going to Ethereum when colored coins and Counterparty were not accepted back in 2014. You had Emin Gun Sirer starting Avalanche. It's all these, the list goes on.
Decred came from that. Dash came from the unwillingness to add privacy back in the day when the Darkcoin thing. Zcash is basically Dash's same story, just like a year later. And I mean, it's like all
and Paul.
Yeah,
and Paul Stork is one of those people that's held on the longest. And it's really tough to see someone with such a brilliant mind and such great ideas and contributions ready to deploy, basically, being rejected by the Bitcoiners on no other reason than dogma. I mean, it's, to me, Truthcoin and Truthcoin, as I think he originally called it, but Drivechains make sense as like an L2 scaling solution to Bitcoin, a way to scale Bitcoin with decentralized layer 2s. So you had what's ironic to me is Bitcoiners accepted things like Blockstream's Liquid and the Lightning Network, which centralizes at scale, and all these other subpar solutions. Meanwhile, they're rejecting something that is essentially optimism, like an optimistic roll-up for Bitcoin. So the way that I would describe Drivechains is like an optimistic style roll-up where there's a long settlement period. It's a minimum of 3 months for these transactions to be finalized on chain. And I think it's not that anyone's likely to reorganize things even a few blocks back. It's just, from what I can tell, the 3-month minimum is to pacify Bitcoiners in their extreme conservatism toward changes to the protocol, which I understand, but I also believe they don't understand the underpinnings of, and they're reflexively rejecting things like Drivechains.
Yeah, and so basically a drive chain, what's the bridging mechanism for Drivechains? Do you know?
I don't. I'd imagine it's some kind of logic in the smart contract and like the script. I mean, it's probably like a native solution. I don't think it has any reliance on trusted third parties.
Yeah, and so Paul did agree, as of I guess yesterday, to come on my podcast and talk about this. And I've read way too much about Drivechains to have this little understanding in how they work, because there's something very, like, it either seems way too simple or way too complicated. It's just like, well, if everyone could do this, why wasn't this? Or then there's also the bits of like, how does that even work? But I guess the point is, it seems like an L2 that is inexorably tied to the L1 in like a way where it settles on chain. It's not just trust us, it's an L2, you bridge it and then you're back. It's like, no, it's actually tied to it. It seems like it's like flexible, not like Lightning where you can't Lightning send to anyone. It's only like one person, and then you stitch them together and maybe you can route around other people, but it's like you're just like free. You can just do whatever. You can do like zero knowledge proofs maybe, and do like stuff like that. All kinds of cool stuff. And also that there's a security model that benefits the miners as well, because Lightning is all about removing stuff, or Lightning is basically like batching, kind of, I would call it, in that you just sort of combine some transactions. You just batch together transactions into fewer on-chain things and just spend less. And that means less for the miners is not necessarily good. And you want more money going to the miners. You just don't want total fees. You don't want per transaction fees being that high. And the problem is Lightning cuts down on per transaction fees, but also cuts down on miner revenue. And then it doesn't scale economically. The design doesn't work. And so from my understanding, Drivechains is at least like merge mined so that it does contribute to, and then the miners get, fees from the L2 as well. So the same security model kind of grows as this grows. So it sounds almost like I wouldn't say perfect, but a I would call it a workable solution for Bitcoin scaling. It sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. I think the merge mining is an important aspect of it. I have other criticisms of Lightning, but won't go into those here. But my
Yeah.
question, if I could throw one in for your talk with Paul, I will watch that. I'm really interested in seeing his explanation of Drivechains. My question to him would be, can you do this without the buy-in of the Bitcoin community, or does it require some kind of protocol upgrade or change to the code? Because if you can do it without their buy-in, this is supposed to be a permissionless innovation, a space of permissionless innovation. And if it is possible and it works, people will do it anyway, or people will go along with it. So, I know Paul doesn't like to rock the boat onto things, but well, he kind of does. But I think if he can take this step forward without the social consensus mechanism of proof of holistic agreement, proof of kumbaya in the Bitcoin community, then he should.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it for it to be possible. The problem is the Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin consensus mechanism, which doesn't really exist formally. There's just, where does the thought leadership go to where you can create enough noise amongst enough people to where enough companies and service providers and stuff will just not want the drama and just stay out. That's kind
cancel
of the thing.
culture. It's
Yeah,
literally cancel culture.
I mean, you
It's
said it, not
embarrassing.
me,
These
but
people are.
I'll say it too.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is
I'll
cancel
say it.
culture.
Yeah, fuck them. Yeah, no, Bitcoiners
Exactly.
LARP about eating a steak only diet and have this undercurrent of toxic masculinity. Meanwhile, they're the weakest people in the space and depend on social agreement to propagate their stupid ideas. So I have no problem shooting on Bitcoiners, besides Paul and the people that are really making a difference in that space. But
Yeah, and
I'm preaching to the choir here.
I'll be very also nuanced in this by saying that I don't really shit on Bitcoiners. I definitely shit on maxis though, because there's a big difference. There's a lot of even what I would call Bitcoin majoralists, or people who maybe it should be big maximalists, but maxis are such pieces of crap anyway that you have to come up with a new word. It's people that like one of my friend Sergey Kotliar of Bitrefill. He cares about Bitcoin. He doesn't really care about any other coin, but he's also willing to I guess criticize the direction of Bitcoin when it happens. Like, he was a big critic of default RBF, and he's also more than willing to enable USDT on Tron for his service because customers want it, and to on podcasts and stuff with maxis not hide that fact either. Just be super honest about everything. So there's people like that. But yes, the maxi governance system that now, in order to, I think that the governance system, I don't think it's good enough, obviously. It could have worked out a lot better if the first decision was more sound. The first decision, which was to not scale on chain and therefore scale on other chains, ended up taking on such a convoluted thing, because I believe a lot of those, and again, so many big block people probably watch this compared to small block people. I do believe that Blockstream and a few entities like that were spearheading that decision for bad faith reasons, because they didn't just say, well, we want everyone to be able to run a node. We want to keep L1 decentralization. They wanted to block off all methods of using Bitcoin that didn't involve their product. And unfortunately, like Blockstream, like Liquid, no one uses it, goes down as failure, whatever. I mean, I don't think they knew it'd be that way at the time, but it is. And then everything that's like Blockstream and the same people are all invested in a lot of the Lightning-based companies and techs and stuff like that.
Right.
And I do understand how super toxic kind of people or super originalist people might only like Lightning, because with Lightning you're literally just doing a multi-sig transaction with one other person, a payment channel, and then you just stitching those together and stuff. But it's not just like Bitcoin goes in this big honey pot and then there's this L2 free floating around. It's literally just people in these little teeny Bitcoin pockets that are just sharing back and forth. And it's just like, well, it's just like a little bit. It's all, you can always just like settle right back on chain of your little pocket. And I understand that. But the problem is that the culture has gotten so like toxic and rejecting things that I think that if drive chains were proposed in 2015, 2016, right? And there wasn't a company like Blockstream that was literally trying to push its own product on there, I think that the small block camp would have easily pushed into just activating drive chains almost immediately. And we'd have a very different world today, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think this again goes back to why I'm a fan of ungovernance or non-governance, because Amin Soleimani has been talking about ungovernance, but I take it a step further and say there should literally be no governance in blockchains. And I've come around to this idea, especially more recently, seeing the dilution of values in every L1's ecosystem, particularly Ethereum, with Ryan Sean Adams of Bankless praising PiCoin and praising WorldCoin, these just atrocities of crypto. And, seeing the dilution of values there makes me think that these people are going to influence the direction the protocols move. And what we've seen in crypto is this cycle of getting invaded by normies, people who have very little to none of the value alignment that we initially had in crypto. And so I think the solution to that is designing your chain so that it's IBC compliant, IBC compatible, so that it can plug into other chains. People can exit if they want to. Designing it in a way that's modular so that you are able to encode the values of your values into the protocol. This is something Nick Fett from Telor, which is a decentralized oracle on Ethereum, talks about. He said, your protocol's values are coded into the smart contract at inception. When you launch your smart contract, it has the values that you care about. Like Circle has censorship, the ability to censor transactions with USDC. That's coded into the smart contract. It's plain for everyone to see that Circle does not prioritize decentralization or censorship resistance. It's right there in the code. In the same way, you need to code in the values of censorship resistance to your smart contract and to your L1, not giving the opportunity for those values to be changed later with future governance upgrades the way that Bitcoin has. So I think even though Bitcoin didn't have a formal governance solution, and this is something that I think Justin Bonds could weigh in really well with. He and I have been talking about this for the last 6 years or so on Twitter, and just going back and forth on various designs, and he's become kind of a pro-governance, I wouldn't say maximalist, and I've become, a pro-market is the way that I would frame it, pro-free market governance minimalist. So I would love to have that conversation sometime.
Well, before we jump into a little bit of that, let me just hit this last drive chain thing because it's kind of funny about the cancel culture. This thing on drive chains, right? About all right, people, we're playing game chess here, blah, blah, blah. We don't need sound peg money, blah, blah, blah. There's just this big thing about like the arguments for using drive chains or whatever. And then the conclusions this person arrives at are, one, why the rush? B, why not just go use Monero if you need that level of enemy in your transactions? And blah, blah, blah. And then the comment, this is Litecoin.btc tweeted. He says, quickest way to turn a Bitcoiner into an altcoiner is start having a debate about drive chains. And it's really weird because there's this big idea of everyone should use Bitcoin. It's the biggest, everyone needs to do this. But then Bitcoin shouldn't allow you to necessarily do the things you want to do with it. And then therefore you should go shitcoin, right? Go shitcoin elsewhere, but that's bad. So it's this weird thing about like do that somewhere else, but if you do, no, you're terrible for doing that. And so I do believe that Bitcoin has to, as a whole, and I did a tweet about little tweet thread earlier in the week about this, about the more people the toxic maxis like get rid of, the better that is for Bitcoin, I think, because probably that makes their little sphere of influence just so much smaller, no one cares. Or on the other hand, it makes Bitcoin really collapse fast, so we can just get it over with and move on with our lives. But at some point, Bitcoin has to determine: can you make people happy? Can you give people what you either have to give people what they want in Bitcoin? So Lightning is kind of a way of doing that a little bit, but not really, because it's not really what anyone wants. But Drivechains are a great way of doing that. Or can you say, nope, Bitcoin does this, and if you don't want anything else, go use another chain, but not ironically shitcoin scammer, laser eye, or like, no, actually say, yeah, fine, go ahead, use that. So just say, I use Bitcoin because I like it the most. I also use Monero on the side because I like the privacy part that Bitcoin doesn't have really. And then be cool, great. You use, like, you have to be able to, otherwise people will just not use Bitcoin. They'll just use other things completely, because you either have to give people an option to use Bitcoin for everything they want, or that, which includes like a Bitcoin adjacent layer like an L2, or you have to give people the option to use Bitcoin and also use other coins for the other things. If you don't let people do either of those things, it's just not going to work out, honestly.
Yeah, it's like there's this circularity in their thinking, which is honestly characteristic of Bitcoin maximalists. But it's like, don't use Bitcoin, or use Bitcoin for everything, but don't use it for that, and don't use it for that. And like, but you also can't go to other places to have these same features. You can't go to Monero for privacy. You can't go to Ethereum for any kind of like decentralized application, but we don't want to do that here. And I think the way you're describing it is interesting, in that like the Bitcoin community needs to decide what it wants, as if the Bitcoin community is monolithic. I mean, sort of to your previous point, there are good Bitcoiners, I would say, like Brian Harrington, who we both are friends with. I think Brian is a great example of like a positive Bitcoiner. Yeah. And he gets it. Like, we had a discussion on his podcast of like using how to use Ethereum sort of as an L2 to Bitcoin, in that it can transfer wrapped BTC and other types of Bitcoin. But I think the underlying idea is like the Bitcoin community as a monolithic entity is sort of a counterproductive mental model, because there are so many diverse interests here that it's impossible to decipher which direction is the right one to go without a formal governance system. So to Justin's likely point, this failure of coordination is attributable to a lack of governance. But I would say, because there's no way to formalize that in a purely, in a way that resembles modern day governance, maybe there is a way to formalize governance in a market, sort of in a free market oriented way. But I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm not sure that there is. But yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate consideration, is like, how do you do governance in this space? It's like the meta problem.
Well, before we hit on that for just a little bit, we did have a super chat from Onetime. Hi, Onetime. And he just said, I think it came a little after we stopped talking about this stuff, but it's about the stablecoin stuff. He says, I hope eventually it will just be common sense that everyone understands that it's worthwhile to learn how to have control of your own funds rather than trust a custodian. Absolutely. I do think it is somewhat of common sense to some things, where people just say, like, for example, being able to grow your own food and stuff. I think everyone kind of understands that that's cool, even if you don't care, even if you don't do it. And there's some things like, everyone understands cash in the hand is like cool, or like something in your direct custody. It's just that the extrapolation, I think people have normalized the fractional reserve banking and custodial things too much, because honestly, at some point, it's because, and this is where the whole CBDC thing comes in, where you have like gold, and then you have like paper and all that kind of money, and actual self-custody money kind of advanced to a certain part, but there has been no digital self-custody money until crypto, where it just kind of advanced, and then when you hit like credit cards and then online banking and stuff, self-custody money just hit a brick wall. And if you wanted to be modern, you had to give up custody. You had to trust all that. As that advanced, and then all of a sudden crypto pops up here, and then stablecoins start popping in here. And so now you can actually do digital sovereignty as well as digital non-sovereignty, where you can do both. And so now I think it'll be more worthwhile to kind of do that. Also, let's just be honest, like government censorship of money has been way too crappy of a UX for them up until very recently, right? Where it's just like, oh, shut down this guy's bank account. It's like, first off, you got to find out which bank he banks with. And it's like, do they have a centralized KYC database for this person? I mean, now they definitely do, but like not all they didn't always have it. And then now it's just like getting easier to where now you could just like watch the flow of funds and just be like, this percentage of this came from illicit means and this, that. And then you could just get to like censor someone's balance and freeze and then remove just the part of his balance that you know that he didn't get. Like you can just say, I'm going to freeze your balance and prove you have 90 days to prove the source of all these cash off the record transactions you got into your PYUSD account. And if not, we're just going to destroy those funds and you get to keep the legitimately owned ones. It'd just be so easy. And that if it's easy, there will be more of it. And if there's more of it, then people will be like, oh crap, I need something censorship resistant now. And that's just how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I'd say like if it's profitable, there will be more of it. And, governments, we're seeing like traditional banking services evolve more toward the ability to censor. And so as the alternative to that system, I think we should really be focusing on, and this is why I just hammer home censorship resistance. Like that is the only 10x value proposition of cryptocurrencies. You can have like open finance and where you can see the balances in someone's treasury and someone's account. That's nice, but it's not a 10x. You can have people reporting on that are like trusted auditors or whatever, or get some company to do periodic quarterly audits on a company for that same kind of thing. And it's not going to cost as much. It's not going to provide, but it's also not going to provide like a 10x value prop like censorship resistance can. That is the only thing that cryptocurrencies and blockchain-based applications can do that nothing else on the planet can. So I think we need to be evolving toward that. And to the super chatters point, yeah, absolutely. Like would love if people eventually all learn how to custody their own assets, but I think we have a long way to go on that. And it might take some bumps in the road where people are getting their bank accounts frozen or their CBDC accounts frozen by the Fed or whatever agency runs that in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think the only maybe could be another, like every topic is another hour, but another hour-long topic that just mentioned for 30 seconds is I don't think self-custody will become fully normalized until you have a decentralized social recovery system where like if you have a wallet, I do a backup where I can get in by typing in my username and you sign off of it. Let's just say Paul from Edge signs off on it, and let's just say Justin Bond signs off on it. If like and then let's say throw in another person. It's like 3 out of the 4 sign off, I get my money back. Yeah, there we go. And then, and because otherwise people's backups are going to be scribbled down like seed phrases in their desk drawer where some guy robs their house and just takes their computer, but also takes that, and then they just lose it all. And then, then we're gonna put it in a safe somewhere, but then you lose the safe, or you're gonna put it in a bank deposit box where the government can still come in and take. It just becomes annoying, but to where you could like literally digitally be like, my mom, my brother, and my lawyer, and my best friend, and I enter the username because that's the one thing I can remember in case I lose everything. And then 3 of the 4 or 2 of the 4 have to sign and say, yes, that's actually them. So then when they get a ping thing in their in their wallet or whatever, a wallet push notification, which is awful with crypto. They don't have that protocol level for the most part. Not many protocols do. Then they call you up and just say, hey, did you get locked out of your damn wallet again? sorry. And then, all right, fine, I'll sign it. And you get back in. If you have something that's that intuitive, but is also like trustless other than, or
selectively trusted.
Structurally trustless, but selectively trusted and social, I think that could work.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm a little more partial to the old school way of doing things with like cold wallets and keeping your funds offline, but like that's not for everybody. And the analog that I think, kind of like Linux is not for everybody, but if you can run Linux, it's good to run Linux. But the historical analogy I think I like to frame this with is like pirates, right? Pirates didn't have a judicial system that was a robust judicial system they could appeal to. There's a really interesting guy, Peter Leeson, who's at George Mason. He's an economist. He's studied pirates extensively. Yeah,
which,
me too.
Imagine getting paid for that. You just like, I'm going to just read up on pirates.
Just study pirates, studying pirate law. Awesome. That's like, he's got to be.
Does he get to study ninjas too? Like, come on.
Yeah, he's probably one of the more interesting people in academia. I would say top 5 at least. With Robin Hanson, who's also at George Mason, and who else? Who am I thinking of? Who else is at George Mason? Walter.
It's been so long.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's so he studies pirates and suggests that pirates actually had a pretty good system of law and order, even though they had like
even though they're more like guidelines anyway.
Yeah, well,
you gotta start dropping all the Pirates of Caribbean lines in there,
Yeah, so like even though these guys had anarchy at like sort of a meta level, they also had like a system of incentives that worked for them. And another thing that they did, what did pirates do with their treasure? They hid it, right? And they had treasure maps, and so they could share with people that they trusted how to get that treasure in case they lost it or in case they were killed or something like that. And they also had it in mind of like how they could get the treasure back, and maybe they would put like some booby traps in there that only they would know how to
shard the treasure map amongst their trusted people, but they don't trust them enough to give them the entire map,
Right, exactly. And so we have historical analogs for ways that this can be done, and I think crypto is a really interesting social phenomenon because it's putting us back into forms of organization that are reminiscent of past human civilizations at the same time as moving forward in terms of like our technological development. So crypto is facilitating more of a tribal organization structure with in networks of trusted groups of people, and the ability to gatekeep is very strongly upheld and integral to the crypto ethos. So this is kind of like lunar punk philosophy for anybody that wants to look this up. Lunar as in moon, and punk as in cypherpunk. Some of these ideas are coming from that.
One thing's for sure is like and obviously we can't ramble very much longer on this, and which is why we keep teasing this a little bit by bit, and then when we get Justin on, we'll actually hash this whole thing out in a big way. But
hash.
It's all the puns, see who has most at stake. Anyway, so I found out like reality teaches lessons, right? And I learned about Bitcoin, learned how it worked, and I just assumed it was like decentralized, it was going to work, but I didn't know, like, I didn't understand it well enough because I just started learning about it. I didn't understand it well enough to understand like the process for code upgrades and stuff, and like who decides stuff, and I kind of understood how it worked if there was like a hostile attack, and like if the majority of the network went off, you could still fork off, and like the good people can still use the fork chain and the captured one, whatever. I understood all that stuff, but as far as like the way things actually worked out, I got a weird rude awakening during the block size wars, because in my opinion, the big block camp or I wouldn't say the hardcore big block camp, but the camp that would prefer to have a big block approach, the scaling approach, I would say camp, would be probably like 70% or 80% of the Bitcoin community. I would say it's most of
It was.
the humans and most of the capital involved.
Yeah.
And just at the very strongly, like as far as like hardcore big blockers versus hardcore small blockers, it might have been more 50-50 on that. But as far as like casual big blockers, absolutely, I think it was a significant majority there. And again, we don't know. We absolutely have no way of actually knowing other than,
we kind of do. Justin compiled an Excel sheet a while ago of like which, maybe it was at the time. I remember seeing this Excel sheet that said which core developers were in favor of a big block versus a small block approach. And so while the community was definitely overwhelmingly for scaling and increasing the block size, at least to like 4 megs or 8 megs, there were most of the core developers were against scaling, and they were gatekeeping this, this responsibility and saying, no, like we know better than you do, and we're going to make sure that Bitcoin succeeds. Meanwhile, that was just enriching them, literally financially enriching them, and also with social capital. Blockstream, right, exactly. And the people who are proponents of the Lightning Network and other things like that. And I remember back in 2017 arguing with Adam Back in really long Twitter threads and getting to the bottom of it and being like, this motherfucker is disingenuous and he is arguing,
not real.
This motherfucker is not real. Yeah. So, and like, I have no problem calling this out publicly. And when I get EatSleepCrypto back on Twitter, I'll definitely broadcast this for more people to see. But might be in Twitter archive somewhere. But anyway, so there were a lot of core developers that were small blockers, and so I think they, to avoid putting the conspiracy hat on of saying like there were paid sock puppets to AstroTurf our Bitcoin, which there were, I would say it lay in the developer's interest to keep Bitcoin's block size small rather than scaling.
Absolutely. And so we had this disagreement there, and I do remember I did daily watch the miner signaling, because there was, I forget which, was it Bitcoin XT at the time? There's a few different big block Bitcoin implementations that miners were just signaling for. And it was always pro versus not pro, which doesn't mean against, but pro versus, it was always like 42%, somewhere on there where the hash rate was signaling in favor of large blocks, where the rest was just like either against or, most honestly, sitting on the fence. And so that's honestly most of it. And then when you got to SegWit 2x, miners signaling got into the 90s almost instantly.
Yeah,
like
people
were ready, and I wouldn't call SegWit 2x as a big block vote, but I would call it like was a compromise, a 70 to 80% big block vote, because very few small blockers were about SegWit 2x. It was almost all like, it was a combination of realistic big blockers and just everyone else who just wants things to work and everyone to get along.
And like back at that time, like when SegWit 2x was being proposed and considered for an upgrade, like Bitcoin fees, the Bitcoin blocks were starting to fill up. The fees were starting to increase, and people saw that if they continued at that rate, that it would be $100 a UTXO for transactions.
I mean, it's kind of funny how like at the end of 2015 is when I stopped being paid in fiat and went all in Bitcoin. And I was just about Bitcoin. And based on like the first proposal for the Dash network I was involved in any way, was somewhere around October of 2016. So in 2016, it was already like untenable for me personally. A whole year before a lot of other people it was. But yeah, I remember those times. It was already filling up, and people just wanted relief, wanted things to help out. And I would say that the 2Xers, again, mostly realistic big blockers or just people who wanted things to work. And the social attack mechanism backed them off in the end. And that is Bitcoin's, and that's the weakness in Bitcoin's governance mechanism, is that was the governance mechanism. The governance mechanism was the strong was two things, I would say.
Social contract.
Was the I guess the extremist side, right? The very motivated activists, the activist group, whoever controls the biggest activist group wins, but also the core developers, which is the number one most important thing about that. The other stuff was just for show, almost. The core, like paying the core developers and getting them, whoever the development team was the number one thing, because after, like, that's why the miners, I think, backed off in the end, and that's also, my opinion, why Bitcoin Cash never really took off then, is because people didn't view it with trust. They were like, well, we like what they're about, but we don't trust them to like get things together. And then the development team was run by Amari, and Amari, for all his, brilliance and stuff like that, was also very controversial, and not everyone in the big block space was on board with his decisions. And finally, after he went off to eCash, now it's like, now you start to have a developer group in Bitcoin Cash left that you can start building that trust. But this is like, how many years has it been? 6 years already? It's just like, that's why Bitcoin crushed the forks in the meantime, because people trusted the core team, really. It just was too risky. It was too risky. Even though they wanted big blocks, they wanted the core team to implement big blocks, and the core team wasn't going to do it. So that's where the trust went. And so that's where the lack of governance, I would say, or that's how it went. And so Bitcoin's governance system works fantastic until you have those big issues. And I don't know, how do you prevent someone from taking over the core team like that without an explicit governance mechanism?
Yeah, well, I think you okay, so I would explain this a little differently, because I was pro eCash and pro Treasury 10% in the that fork, and I left shortly after because I was like, this is a shit show. I'm going to Ethereum. We'll build over there. But I think the problem is not trust in the core team. It's unfounded trust in the core team, where the economic incentives are not necessarily there. And whenever you have a situation with people in charge of the changes to the protocol, where the protocol is not making money, the only reason someone would want to be in charge of the protocol would be to control it for their personal ends. And so that's going to result in misaligned incentives, because you have people that are controlling the protocol, whether they're buying governance tokens or whether they're just gatekeeping changes to the code and saying, we don't want a block size increase, we're going to keep the block size limit in. In either case, in both cases, there's this misalignment of incentives, because the core devs are not getting paid directly by the success or through the success of the protocol. Now contrast that with the 10% tax, minor tax, to the treasury in eCash, and you have an alignment of incentives for Amaury and Bitcoin ABC to do this. So I think the way they went about it was maybe not the best. And of course, it's challenging being in an engineering heavy space and expecting like tactful engagement along like social lines. That's a big ask. And like Amaury's inflammatory, and it's a challenge to do that right. But I think the approach that they were going for is the correct one, because it at least starts to align the incentives of developers with the success of the protocol as determined by token price.
Now, of course, the challenge with that is, how do you determine who gets that money and who runs things? And that's where you get into the complexities of governance. The thing is,
well, I mean, they did solve for that, right? In a sort of a rudimentary way, where the miners are the ones that change the address, but then it requires the miners' agreement, which is the whole problem that we had in the block size upgrade in the first place.
And also, I think that and this, I believe, affects proof of stake as well, just not as much. But I think people really underestimated miner apathy. Like, miners just want to make money. Like, there was, I think you kind of see a little bit of that. There was a community of miners, like the Bitmains of the world, I guess, who did have a position and did kind of support,
most of the miners supported big blocks. It was
Yes.
Huobi. It was not Huobi. Might have been
Bitmain,
Huobi, but
Antpool, Bitmain.
yeah, and Pool Bitmain. But who am I thinking? Hypo Yang with
Yeah.
what was Hypo's thing? Your CoinX. All these Chinese companies blend together for me. I just like, it's so interesting. This is a total tangent, but how much
Greatwolf throw
innovation is
in
going on in
his via
China?
BTC, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
via BTC. Yeah.
Yeah, so the whole mining space had a lot more opinions, I guess, it seemed like. They were a little bit more active governance players, except at the end they didn't. And then that really set the precedent of like miners are just mercenaries. In fact, I don't know
Right.
if you've paid attention to Decred's stuff recently, but Decred
No,
reduced,
I tuned out in like 2018.
yeah, which is the smart thing to do in a lot of ways. But Decred has been the the site of some interesting stuff. They've always been a proof of work, proof of stake hybrid with the treasury, and they just, I don't know if they did it or they voted to do it, reduce their proof of work allocation to 1%. They've almost cut out mining completely, and the reason they did that is because most of the miners on Decred, according to, again, this is what the co-founder told me and a lot of the other people, I didn't do too much. They basically found a lot of forensic evidence that the miners were explicitly trying to suppress the Decred price. Like they were playing games. Like they literally were just mining Decred and were strategically selling it in ways that dumped the price because they were getting such a giant amount of money from the network that wasn't just, that was on the markets. They were getting they were whales because they got most of the money that was floating around there, and they strategically timed it. Probably they had a bunch of shorts on Decred and stuff, were making money off of that, but they basically traced it there, and so they basically cut out miners almost entirely because the opposite of like the via BTC and fucking Antminer and all that stuff, the opposite of that, they were actively against the network. They were not only mercenaries, but mercenaries profiting from the network's demise. And
That's interesting because I
yeah,
wouldn't necessarily read that as it being against the interests of the network. You might also read that as their interest in accumulating more of the tokens because they're bullish on the network long term. Or you could also, the counter argument to that is that they were trying to accumulate more stakes so that as Decred transitions from proof of work to proof of stake, that they ensure that they have more of it. So, but in either case, it's a forward-looking bet, and the game theoretic equilibrium there, like the Nash equilibrium, depends on whether they're bullish on Decred long term, and that's kind of, I'd have to run the numbers and see which one that is. But that's a really interesting case
yeah,
about like, yeah, I would love if you send me anything on that.
absolutely. I'll send you stuff that it seems like because it was such a harmful thing to the network that the network overwhelmingly voted to basically get rid of mining. And so to the network's, I wouldn't say short term, but maybe compounded short term interests, because short term interests over 5-6 years, like a long time, they were like, this is existential for us. We need to fix this. And so that would lead me to believe that the miners were either just not communicating, just somehow did not understand what was going on from the rest of the network's point of view, or they were deliberately suppressing the price in order to profit personally, but not for the long-term benefit of the network. Or that's one, either that or it was 4D chess. This is where they get the tinfoil hat, where they're like, look, long-term mining just burns a lot of energy. It's costly, and long-term for the security you get, it's very costly, and so it works out really well for distributing the coin and stuff like that. But long-term, most projects will probably transition to proof of stake, like Zcash is looking into doing. And it's like, okay, well, probably what we're going to do is we're going to sort of force that, and we're going to screw up the network as much as we can to our own coin benefit, like price suppression, get money, price suppression, get coins. And so then we're basically going to burn our own mining business to the ground and have a giant staking business to replace it when they transfer completely.
Were there
It could have been
Decred
that way.
ASICs?
I believe so. I think there's even Monero ASICs. I mean, I don't know how many there are
Yeah,
today, but there were when they changed the algo.
yeah, before they were changing the algorithms. Yeah, because that would be like an important data point. My suspicion is they were just doing whatever was maximizing profit in their near
Yeah.
to medium term.
They probably
But
didn't believe in Decred super long term. So they were like, well, we make money extracting from the network. We can just sell it right away. But we could, which just dump right away, put constant downward pressure on the price. Or we could strategically dump at times to maximize our profit, or even open up some shorts on the other side to, to then maximize the effect of selling. So now it's like, oh, we actually want to bet too. And like, because and this is an interesting thing, this affected Dash to a certain extent as well, where mining revenue is most of the selling on the network, probably. But there's enough of it that's staked up that you get to actually move the price significantly with this stuff. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's all coming through mining. So there's all selling and buying and stuff right there. And so it's this interesting dynamic that it's like a very much smaller percentage of the money is actually out there on the network. But then you have just enough selling from the miners to where that actually can move the price. Whereas if it was entirely proof of work, you wouldn't be able, there'd be a lot on the market, you wouldn't be able to move the price. But if it was like 1% or 2%, something like that proof of work, that money could not then move the price. But it's just this weird hybrid where it's like nightmarish for the price, kind of. I don't know. Interesting things to think about, huh?
I actually would love to speak with you more about this because I'm thinking about a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake system for one of our clients. So we should definitely talk more about this. But I know we wanted to talk a little bit about a little more stablecoin stuff with Vampire Attack, unless you feel like we don't quite have time.
We'll briefly touch on that. Let me hit the super chat. There's one more from before we go to that. We got from Greatwolf. Hi, Greatwolf. He says, would it be fair to classify small blockers kind of like woke / mental sickness we have in today's society? Does Nate have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Like, I think weak people tend to look for social consensus before making any decision. And we're seeing that sort of play out in Bitcoin. But on the other side, like, I don't think it's a characteristic of small blockers. I think that's a really apt observation, that it's a symptom of the social sickness that we have, because you see it in the opposite extreme on DSV as well, where they say the solution to the problem of corruption is going to be for everybody to surveil everybody else. And that is just as much a form of cancel culture as what's happening in Bitcoin, because it creates a North Korea style social organization. And so I think this is like not just a problem of small blockers, it's a problem of people in general, and is symptomatic of, like you said, where humanity is at right now.
Yeah, I do think that it's kind of interesting because both Bitcoin and Ethereum, according to what Justin Bond says, and I do tend to believe him because of the way history has repeated itself, both of those chains have gotten co-opted by the money that's in L2s that's just not in L1. Is in, you can't capture that money, at least. And so, on the other hand, Ethereum seems to be more freewheeling with this, whereas Bitcoin, I believe, kind of got captured once, and I don't think it's been recaptured or even continuously captured. It's just kind of like the people involved with Lightning and, all those kinds of things, they just sort of forced it like that, and then now I think they solidified them. I don't know is Blockstream really making any money? I mean, they seem to be kind of a failure.
I thought I saw like $50 million or something of revenue that was going through Blockstream, or maybe TVL. I saw this recently. Blockstream has not insignificant TVL.
Interesting. Is this
but
from
still,
Liquid?
Compared to, Liquid. So
Blockstream Liquid, which is same thing, kind of, right?
Same thing, same exact,
but like, what about fees?
But it's not nearly what they thought. Well, I think fees are an okay way of approximating how much business a blockchain is serving, but they're not I don't think fees are an adequate mechanism to describe the value being created, and they are also not the best way to capture value for blockchains broadly. I think that
Yeah.
there are other ways to do it.
Because like I would view Liquid as mostly a failure today without extra
Yeah,
data to back that, right? Just I feel
I'm
like
sure
it's
they would too.
I
Yeah, I'm
feel
with
like
you.
it's a failure, and I feel like a lot of people are starting to consider Lightning to be the same thing. Not that it's, I would say not a didn't work, not a no one's using it, but as a underperformance for sure, and to
Totally.
where people are now starting to look at other solutions for Bitcoin, and so Ethereum is very different. Ethereum's making falling out of control, making tons of money, like all that kind of stuff. But I do think that this hostile culture, the cyber hornets, as it were, have been it's so cringe, but it works. People like that stuff, you
That
know.
fucking guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but so the cyber hornet effect does defend against a lot of new ideas, and that's the biggest criticism of Bitcoin. That's also the biggest compliment one could give, I think,
Mhm.
is that the
Mhm.
culture is so hostile to things it perceives as damaging the purity of the system. Unfortunately, it ends up, excusing custodial solutions and stuff like that. But the thing is, like Ethereum is kind of like I think that every project does need a core, I guess, value system with a bunch of core community members that are, I guess, active and uncompromising on some things in order to,
Yeah,
yeah, in order to
but
keep the thing working.
yeah, but if those are people, then you have trusted third parties, right? And if you have
Yeah.
you could formalize a system of governance, but why hasn't anyone? And so this is why I'm in the ungovernance camp. But I would analogize it to like an immune system
Mm-hmm.
with Bitcoin. Is like they have an autoimmune disorder, and the
Mm-hmm.
question is it better to have an autoimmune disorder or to have a no immune system at all, or a weak immune system? And then of
Yeah.
course the rebuttal is the best would be a properly functioning immune system. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if that's possible. Like, I'm not sure that governance outside of
Mm-hmm.
free market incentives, or even with free market incentives, is completely possible.
So there's two
So
tweets that can come out of that. One is toxic Bitcoin maximalism is an autoimmune disorder. If you
yep.
tweet that, I'll definitely retweet that. But
All
also on
right.
the other side, I could say the same thing about DAOs and governance. Is an
Yeah.
overactive DAO or overactive governance is an autoimmune disorder in a crypto project,
Yeah,
because
agreed.
I think that like I'm still super pro explicit governance in crypto, but I've definitely changed from like I've definitely been like it's got to be like an autoimmune. You could have an autoimmune disease if you use it too much. It should be almost never used. Like if it's
Yeah.
there, almost never used. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
that's the problem of like all of these types of social organizations. It's
Mm-hmm.
like things can't be uh it's like Louis CK on yeah, I won't go into it. There's a lot of social organizations that
Mm-hmm.
are like dangerous to have the option of.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think governance is one of them. It's like power corrupts, and so to prevent that, we should go with the original values of crypto, which is censorship resistance,
Mm-hmm.
and just say there's no governance until someone comes up with a perfect system. But until that, I am a DAO minimalist, governance
Mm-hmm.
minimalist. I think DAOs are a cheap band aid on
Mm-hmm.
otherwise very elegant censorship resistant protocols. But I'm not above recommending like parameters that are moderated by or modulated by token holders. I think that's sometimes is a sufficient threat model for protocols to hold. So I won't say I'm completely against DAOs, but I will say I am broadly against governance and think that it's a subpar mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I do think that like the best thing can happen is you just it's I guess a governance mechanism is like how do you survive a relationship fight, but the I think you need to figure out how to do it, but ultimately you want to live in such a way that that almost never happens. You want to minimize that
Right.
as much as possible. And so like Bitcoin, big block Bitcoin, let's just say, theorize that it exists today. Even if it never changed with other things, I mean, I think mostly, even if it never got these kinds of extra applications on top of it, if it just was big block transactional Bitcoin, I think we'd be in a very good place despite that. We still have Ethereum. We still have other things. But I think it would work out great. Ethereum, the only real problem with it, maybe this is me not knowing super tons about Ethereum and talking out my ass here, but it seems like if Ethereum scaled with like proper execution sharding and stuff on L1, there's literally nothing else to really criticize about it. Other than, well, you know, some inefficiencies in this design. Maybe we can try it better here. Maybe this and that. But like mostly it just would freaking work and have no problems if you don't have to do that.
Yeah, I can think of a few. I'm not 100% sold on sharding. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure why they didn't go with the sharding design. I know I trust, in terms of like core developers' designs, I trust Vlad Zamfir because he's been thinking about crypto economics and coined the term in like 2014. But, and I think he was a fan of, he proposed Casper, which was, I think, sharding, if I'm remembering it correctly. But yeah, I mean, there's MEV, which is a problem on Ethereum. There's lack of privacy by default, which is a problem on Ethereum.
Yeah.
But so I wouldn't say there's enough to criticize.
Problems because like
scaling, yeah, those are like not orders of magnitude.
Yeah, because if you scale properly, have cheap enough transactions on L1, then you can run everything through Railgun and have privacy. You know, it's like fine. Yeah, it's maybe not the best, but it works.
It's not it's like Zcash. Like if privacy is not by default, there's kind of no value proposition for it because people can just see that your transaction came from a shielded wallet and they're going to request KYC trail on that if it's USDC or anything else.
Yeah, it makes it a little trickier to do. But
yeah.
Well, speaking of that, we'll just touch on that last stablecoin thing because we're coming up on the 2-hour mark here. And
great.
A lot of stuff. So, this thing about DeFi Made here posted this thing about meantime 1 million USDC against 78 million USDT left. The vampire attack continues. Swap Tether for USDC, cash out USDC, deposit cash, print more Tether with a new cash, repeat. Because Circle has no redemption fees and Tether has a 0.1% redemption fee. It's already cracking me up. USDC will continue losing market share until something changes. Like, I didn't. Yeah. So honestly, I kind of knew that Tether had some sort of redemption fees in there. I did not know enough about USDC and how they work to know whether they do or not. But now just seeing that laid out, I just instantly clicked. This is a freaking disaster. This is such a disaster.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like I never would have expected. This is in the category of economics exploits. So economic security is distinct from technical security, and that economic security, technical security is a lack of bugs in the code. Economic security is a lack of bugs in the incentives. And I never would have guessed that we would see an economic attack against a backed stablecoin. So this is really interesting. There were at one point. There was a rough equilibrium of USDC and USDT in the Uniswap pool. But now, because there's a 0.1% redemption fee on Tether, people are not redeeming. Yeah, they're able to waive that for themselves and purchase USDC or with Tether and then cash out the USDC to Circle with no redemption fee. Then they deposit that money. And at Tether themselves, Tether deposits the money they just got from USDC with Tether in order to print more Tether and then just rinse and repeat that cycle. So now we're down to like $1 million in USDC in the pool and $78 million in Tether, according to this tweet. So that's just like an incredible exploit vector that Tether has identified. And
also,
yeah, you'll love to see it.
It doesn't hurt that Tether might not be fully backed by dollars in the bank. So then if you can just, what happens if you print, let's just say you print an extra 1 million Tethers with no backing, just nothing behind it.
Right.
You print 1 million of those, you swap it for USDC, at a 1-to-1 ratio because people still believe in Tether. And then you get real cash out of it, and now you just infuse that back in your bank account. So you're literally making free real money, real fiat.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah.
this is like, this underscores, it's hilarious because the Tether people are such bastards. Like, they're just, but also this is all going to come down. Like, this is all Ponzi-nomic type stuff. This is all insane. There's going to be a giant stablecoin reckoning at some point. And it's almost like, I think that PYUSD or the CBDC might actually clean up the space a little bit, which doesn't mean I'm for that. I'm for the space being cleaned up, but I'm not necessarily for how it's going to happen. But like, can you imagine people saying we need to regulated stablecoins because look at these crazy games being played by the unregulated space. It's an easy way for regulators to say we need to step in, and there you go, get more government. We all love that, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm less skeptical of Tether now because they settled with the New York Attorney General back in 2021 for like
they paid off the right people.
Or some, yeah. So they either paid off the right people and they're going to be able to continue this and not get cracked down on if the New York Attorney General acts in good faith, or the people in it act on good faith in those upholding the bribes. But if they're subject to bribes, then they can just keep bribing them. Or they are actually fully backed, which was a stipulation of their settlement, which was that they'd have to provide quarterly audits on their backing. So in either case, I'm not worried about Tether blowing up in particular. And I'm much more worried about Circle being fully compliant and within the jurisdiction of the United States. That basically, like, the thought experiment I like to present people with is if USDC went from blacklist by default, meaning you have to be on a list to not be able to redeem your USDC, if it went from blacklist by default to whitelist by default, where everybody had to provide KYC and a clean history of USDC, like a clean UTXO history. Ethereum's an accounts-based system, but basically a clean transaction history. In order to redeem, the value of USDC would plummet, and that would create absolute mayhem in all of DeFi, where people have hard-coded the value of USDC at $1. They've got USDC at 1-to-1 in their pools. The implicit assumption is that one USDC is roughly always going to equal one USDT or one PUSD or any of these other, like PyUSD, any of these other stable coins. So it would create absolute chaos, and that's that systemic existential risk to DeFi on Ethereum comes from a dependence on the U.S. government as a regulator. So I'm not. I know you're not saying you're looking forward to regulation, but I think I would much rather have a bunch of shady tethers than a bunch of USDCs.
Yeah, probably. I'm looking forward to free market regulation, in that I'm kind of looking forward to things getting sorted a little bit, because this whole, like, the house of cards that Tether's upon, like, there's nothing, like, at some point something's got to give. Number 3 crypto, right after Bitcoin and Ethereum, is Tether. And I mean, I think it's going to go down as one of the biggest kind of scams in crypto history, sort of. It's a little weird because it's one of the most practically useful things in all of crypto, and kind of earned its spot in that way, but also is just so shady. And I think that if you got Tether to be fully audited in a real way, and to be backed 1-to-1 with actual dollars in a bank account, which is fractional reserve anyway, so it's not like it's actual dollars in a bank. If you could turn Tether into a bank, to where they literally had to prove ownership of the paper behind every single Tether, and they just had to make their business out of the redemptions and stuff, is literally people paying for the privilege of being able to use fiat on modern crypto rails. That would be fantastic. because other than that, it's a giant elephant in the room, and they're doing so much shady stuff that they're just so close to like something going horribly wrong, like, you know, Luna style. But not nearly the same way as Luna, but in that Luna collapsed, you know.
I would be more concerned about that kind of thing if I didn't see the clear business model that Tether has, which is they can get a few percent on their USD holdings per year, and on however many billions of dollars they have, that's a really incredible business. And I think similarly, like Circle, like all they have to do is not fuck it up. So I'm not so suspicious of Tether's, underlying collateral. I think it's certainly possible that they're not collateralized, but I have more confidence in Tether than I used to. And that's not saying much, because I was in the camp of like, when's Tether going to explode? But after seeing Luna and FTX and watching Tether weather that whole thing, I'm
the cockroach that survives a nuclear holocaust.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't start from the premise that Tether is under collateralized. I know they were at some point. That's been proven in court, but I think it's significantly less likely now than it was a couple of years ago that Tether is under collateralized. So I'm not saying go buy Tether. I would suggest diversifying across stablecoins if you're putting your wealth in stablecoins. But
which you also probably shouldn't do, but a little bit of it is fine. You know?
Yeah, for sure. It's like if you have to use stable coins, okay, but like you're missing out on the upside of crypto if you believe that it's going somewhere long term, and if you don't, then probably don't be in the space at all. But that's yeah. But anyway, that's kind of my take on things. I know we're getting close to time.
Yep, wrap up time. It's it's shill-o'clock already, huh? Yeah, shill-o'clock. What do you want to shell?
Shill-o'clock. Token Dynamics. We launched 3 weeks ago, so it's tokendynamics.xyz, and we're on Twitter at Token Dynamics. It's all one word. And you can find us. We're doing protocol design and tokenomics as a service. We're focused on building censorship-resistant applications and maximizing the value that accrues to a token. So if you're interested in anything like that, just head over, send us a message. We're pretty easy to reach, and looking forward to hearing from some of you, because I know we have a lot of ideologically aligned people, and that's what we're about, is helping the people that care about censorship resistance.
All right, well, anyone who's still watching who hasn't hit the subscribe and like button, please do so on both. Also, in the description, there is the Odyssey link in talking about YouTube, and vice versa. So just if you're already liking and subscribing on one, go to the other. Because I'm still holding on to Odyssey. I still don't want to be someone who like cries when the YouTube channel gets nuked because I said something too spicy, and then I have nothing to show for all this work I put in, right? So like on both of those. It was kind of funny because on the Zcash podcast yesterday that I was running, more people were watching on Odyssey than on YouTube the whole time, because it's the ethos of the community kind of like pushed it more over. Whereas when I do, for example, like the Dash podcast, they're a little more boomer, I guess, and so they're just like YouTube. So anyway, it's kind of fun to see how that works. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for being on, Nate. We'll definitely have you on again once I get my head straight on the governance versus ungovernance kind of topic, and can do like an actual value and content packed discussion, moderating and stuff with you and Justin, and also myself, assuming he's 100% for it. But if not, I can play DAO advocate and we can just do it ourselves. But we'll do it anyway. Bye everybody, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.